Valorant patch 8.0 comes to us with a lot of important changes. On top of that, the meta has been dramatically changing behind the scenes, so in this video we're going to be breaking down the 8.0 tier list so you know all the agents that are the best and worst in this meta. Now the first thing that we need to discuss is the F tier, and as of the recent buffs to Deadlock in particular, there's no longer any agent in the F tier. Every agent has something reasonable to offer, at least on 1 or 2 maps, and I think now more than ever, there's no character that is just objectively bad or unplayable. But we do need to move on to the D tier, and these are characters that can be good, but they're niche in their application, meaning that there's really only one map that they will see substantial play on, and how good they are is going to be dependent on whether that map is in the map pool at any given time. So the first one we got to talk about is Deadlock, and I know Deadlock did get some substantial buffs, but Deadlock's strongest map is looking to be Icebox, but even in spite of all the changes, Deadlock doesn't hold a candle to the other Sentinels on the roster. A buff Sonic Sensor and a really big barrier mesh are really nice additions, but they don't fundamentally change what Deadlock can do for a team, especially if you consider the alternatives that you could pick instead. I do think that Deadlock could be really good in the hands of someone that has really locked in and mastered this character, but for the most part, the character is going to be niche and probably not going to see a substantial amount of play on a ton of different maps. Now, the other character that we do got to talk about is Sage. Sage suffers from a lot of the same problems that Deadlock has. For one, she's really only good on Icebox. For two, the character just doesn't do enough when compared to the other Sentinels, and oftentimes you would rather run a second Initiator or maybe even a second Duelist over a Sage in a composition. I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that Sage has been basically getting nerfed throughout her entire life cycle, but for ranked play, Sage is still a really strong pick, having one of the highest win rates across ranks, and just being able to deny space on a site alone, forcing rushes to rotate off or denying rushes completely. That's still very powerful, and Sage can still be a character that you win with and get a lot of value with, just as a objective meta pick, not the strongest that you could play. Now we're moving on to C tier, and these are characters that do see play here or there, but oftentimes there are either better alternatives or they only see play on like 1 or 2 maps or in certain strategies. First off, we do got to talk about Neon, and Neon unfortunately just doesn't do enough when compared to the other 2 duelists, Jet and Raze, in the meta. She really needs some setup, and specifically Breach setup. Most of the time, you're only going to see Neon on maps like Fracture with a Breach follow-up, and Neon can be good, and some teams utilize them even in pro play, and of course in ranked, if you're a movement god, you can get a lot of value out of Neon, but most of the time, it's just that. It's something that tries to play anti-meta, goes outside the grain, when Raze and Jet are just really fundamental duelists that don't really need someone to always set them up in the same way, and they also play really well with a lot of different versatile initiators rather than Neon kind of really playing specifically well with Breach. Next up in the C tier, we do got to talk about Harbor, and Harbor is mainly used in double controller setups on maps like Breeze and does have potential to see a lot of play as the meta further develops. I do think that double controller setups around Harbor does give you a lot of strategic flexibility, so you're going to see pro teams start to dabble in it more and more. Harbor does struggle a bit when you're trying to solo controller him, but depending on the rank you're in, you could definitely make it work. It's just not going to be as reliable as something like a Viper solo controller or any of the other dome smokers, depending on the map if you're not playing a map like Breeze. Now, we definitely do got to talk about Chamber, and Chamber's just a really solid character at cutting off long sight lines and holding space. I think a lot of people really compare him to his old self, and his old self was like triple S tier, so his nerf self, while definitely worse, is still a really solid character, and with new weapons like the Outlaw, Chamber can abuse it better than just about any other character in the game. So on maps like Breeze, this character is going to be a nightmare to deal with in Breakthrough. But the last character we got to talk about in the C tier is Gekko. Gekko is actually good. There's not really that many problems with Gekko's kit. It's really only down to the comparison that Gekko doesn't see more play. The Initiator role is absolutely stacked, and when you are picking Gekko, you're picking him over many of the other powerful options that are just too good to pass up. In a vacuum, Gekko is amazing, but when you compare him to the other really competitive initiators, he falls a little flat, although he does still get value in the hands of someone who has mastered him. Now, if you really want to get better in climb, we have in-depth guides over almost every single agent on this tier list. Comparing in-depth strategy between your favorite agent and pro players is going to be the easiest way to put yourself in their shoes, make better decision making, and start to climb as quickly as possible. If you've been struggling to improve, then SkillCapped has everything you need, and with our money-back guarantee, if you don't climb, you don't pay. So there's literally no risk in standing by our product to help you improve. So what are you waiting for? Check it out right now down below. Now, the next tier that we do got to talk about is the B tier, characters that see play on multiple maps and multiple strategies, or they see play maxed out on a map and they're basically essential in the meta. First off, we do got to talk about Brimstone. Brimstone on Bind and Fracture, very consistent dome smoker, really great at stalling down sights. An overall very powerful controller that I don't think gets enough credit for exactly how he enables certain strategies. Being able to smoke off multiple places simultaneously in a rush is really, really good. His kit really flows very well together, and in ranked play we know that he has some of the highest win rate across ranks. Really consistent character, definitely a very powerful character, especially if you can learn the lineups. So yeah, Brimstone B tier for sure. Next up, we do got to talk about Fade, and Fade is strong, really, really good, and does see play across different maps. But kind of one of the common themes you're going to find is that when you compare Fade to Skye and Sova, she just lags a little bit behind. It's a pretty close race though. Like, Fade is strong, and if you know how to play Fade, you're going to get more value out of Fade. In fact, I think that Fade is probably better than a lot of other characters if we're talking about ranks that are lower than Ascendant. Fade's really good at clearing angles, really good at taking close space. You're not going to die on like pistol round to someone just holding an angle with the sheriff or shorty. Really, really solid stuff from Fade. But when we start to talk about meta play and when we start to talk about objective power level, Fade falls a little bit behind compared to the other competitive options. And if we lived in a world where those characters didn't exist or those characters were nerfed, Fade would quickly pick up those percentage points. It's not that Fade is bad, it's just that there's other characters that are a little bit better than her. Next up, we do got to talk about Breach, and Breach is phenomenal. Great for setups, whether you're setting up a Jet, Raze, or Neon, or whether you're playing an aggressive defense on Haven. Breach has all the means to take space aggressively, flashing corridors, challenging areas as a team. You could be really versatile in some team strategies around Breach, and I do think that Breach is one of the best duo characters to duo queue. If you're trying to climb with a buddy, Breach and setting up strategies, trying to make proactive strategies, whether you're on defense or attack, really, really great stuff on Breach. Next up, we do got to talk about Astra, and Astra's just very, very solid. Typically won't be a solo controller. You're going to combine Astra with a lot of different characters like Harbor, maybe a Viper, but Astra brings another level to the table with all of her complex utility and team strategy. Astra can warp entire metas around her. Super solid character that creates a lot of very interesting strategies and team compositions, and definitely not a character that you should sleep on, even if she's a little bit unorthodox and not easy to comprehend how she fits into the meta. Last up in the B tier, we have Kayo. And Kayo has a maxed out pick rate on Ascent and is really just powerful all around. The ultimate, the knife, gathering information, denying abilities, attacks the meta in a way that a lot of other characters don't. Ascent is where Kayo shines. Really the only map that Kayo sees a ton of play on, even if Kayo will be kind of across the pro meta where a lot of teams will experiment with Kayo just as a counter strategy or just as a powerful piece of utility in your composition, giving you flexibility with ult rushes, with knife denials, and the list goes on and on. On Ascent though, with all the pop flash lineups that you can do and being able to knife and gain so much information, knifing the mains of both B and A, really solid character and overall still a really, really underrated pick. But you might be wondering where a couple characters are, and before we get into the A and S tier, there is a separate tier that I didn't put into the normal tier list here called Ranked Superstars. And these are characters that are just hard to rate, because if you look at them in pro play, pretty much across the board, they don't see any play, or they see very, very little pro play. But when we look at them in ranked, they're everywhere and they're taking over your game. So how do you properly evaluate these characters? Well, you put them in their own separate tier, which I'm calling Ranked Superstars. And the first one I'm going to talk about is Reyna. Reyna is basically a character that takes your mechanical skill and translates it into value. And if you're popping off, getting kills, winning 1v1s, you're clutching up games on Reyna. But unlike a lot of other characters, you're not playing for the overall strategy. You're more than anything playing for your own individual skill. And while Reyna can give you the means to carry games that no other character can, it's really all on you at the end of the day, and you're not winning the game through fundamental strategy, rather your own play. The other character we do got to talk about is Yoru, and Yoru is close to not being a ranked superstar. There have been pro players experimenting with this character. Yoru does see pro play every once in a while, but when we bring it down to the actual numbers, Yoru's like maybe picked 1% of the time. Very, very low in pro play, but in ranked play, we know that Yoru is a character that as you start to climb, gets higher and higher win rate, all the way up to Radiant. Yoru has some of the highest win rate in the game, but that's only players that have truly mastered the character. So if you want to have a character that is really hard, like has a very, very high skill floor, meaning just learning how to do basic things on the character is very difficult to do, but the skill ceiling is unimaginable, Yoru might be for you, because once you get really good at Yoru, you can become unstoppable at the highest ranks of play. Now, ISO also kind of falls into this category, a character that does have meta potential, but currently isn't seeing any substantial meta play. I think out of all four of these, ISO has the chance to break into the meta scene more than everyone, but we don't really know when or how that's going to happen. Currently, I do think that ISO is more of a ranked superstar than is someone that is going to take up a spot among the many competitive options in the game for a meta pro strategy, but still, I do think that there could be some strategy centered around ISO. So to keep an eye on ISO, ISO could be placed on the regular tier list pretty soon, but for now, ISO's in the ranked superstar status. And last, but certainly not least, is Phoenix. And Phoenix has some of the highest win rates across ranks in freaking ranked play, according to Riot. And I honestly think that Phoenix is like one of the best all-around characters you can play in ranked play. He basically can do everything you need him to do in order to carry a game. Whether you're clearing cubbies, creating space with your wall, self-healing yourself, setting up advantage duels with your flash, or gathering info / making plays with your ultimate that you can get very easily, by the way, with only 6 charges. Phoenix just brings everything you could need to the table in order to dominate a ranked game. Unfortunately, due to how good he is at dominating ranked, it makes him kind of bad at dominating a pro lobby when you would rather have someone that does something very specific and not someone that does it all. But Phoenix is a great ranked choice, and he is probably my ranked superstar of choice if you were looking for someone to pick up and start to grind. Now we are moving on to the A and S tier. I will say that all of these characters are established meta picks, very solid, very strong, and the only difference between A and S is that the S tier characters are just picked a little bit more. They're all pretty much in that top tier meta creme de la creme pick rate. And first character we got to talk about in the A tier is Killjoy. Now Killjoy did get a nerf from FOV of the turret from 180 to 100, meaning that the turret is like, you know, your grandma. Can't see anything, really. It's gonna let a lot of people slip through the cracks, right? But even in spite of that, Killjoy is just so damn strong. I would actually consider that extra bit of FOV kind of as gravy, like more power that you didn't need, and now it's just a very strong character that doesn't have like this extra belt and whistle that makes her that much stronger. Now there is gonna be some angles, some flanks, some things like that that the Killjoy turret can't watch anymore, but overall, Killjoy is still gonna be able to do what she does best, which is lock down a site completely and prevent anyone from pushing or making it that much harder to push, and allowing your team to basically stack another site or basically control the space on the other side of the map a lot more, because the Killjoy section just gets that much more value. I do think that this could greatly weaken Killjoy on attack though, which is always one of the challenges around Killjoy in the first place. So I'm dropping her down a little bit, but I still wouldn't be surprised if she sees over 50% meta play still as one of the best characters in the game. Now, we also got to talk about Cypher on maps like Breeze, maps like Sunset. Cypher is phenomenal with the new double trip. Really great character, and also a character that is going to see play on Fracture when Fracture comes back, and overall Cypher is just a powerhouse. And it's crazy how both Killjoy and Cypher are two sentinels that are basically competing with each other for, like, you know, the highest tier, right? It's not like they're pushing each other out. They're both very competitive and very strong in this tier. I also think that in ranked play, Cypher has the added benefit of being a bit better at lurking when Killjoy is not. So if you're someone that wants to lock down a site but also lurk and make some really powerful plays, Cypher is probably the pick I would suggest for you. The next up in the A tier, we do got to talk about Sova, and Sova's really just good all around. He's played on a ton of different maps. He's a really great info gathering initiator, and all around just a very solid pick. While he's not played on every single map, he's played on a ton of them and is just all around just very strong, very versatile, has the means to make plays with his ultimate. He can gather information, and he is just all around just a superstar, and pretty much always has been. And last up in the A tier, we have Jett. And Jett is just one of the best 2 duelists in the game. The only reason that she's in the A tier and not the S is because there's another duelist that edges her out slightly in the meta right now. But also when it comes comes to opping and abusing the new weapon Outlaw, Jett is going to be better at that than a lot of other characters, pretty much almost every other character. And especially in ranked play, I think that Jett is going to be able to just take on so many hats, whether you're dashing onto site and creating strategic advantage for your team, or you're just popping off with taking a free duel and dashing away. Jett is a phenomenal pick and definitely very, very strong. Now, last up in the S tier, these are the best of the best characters that are going to see substantial meta play for this foreseeable future, and it doesn't seem like that's going to change anytime soon. First off is Viper. Viper is just needed and absolute. There are maps where Viper is 100% essential, like Breach, and it really wouldn't matter if Viper was nerfed at all, because Viper would still be needed. Like, her meta play is 100% dependent on the fact that she is needed 100% of the time on a lot of these maps, and then her power level allows her to get extra pick rate across maps in like dual controller setups and things like that. Viper is super strong, super powerful, and super essential, so she's an S tier pick. Next up, we do got to talk about Skye, and I would say Skye is the best all-around initiator. Just a character that can kind of do it all. Does gather information, does set up your team, allows you to clear close cubbies, and when it comes to the heal, which is really good on eco round, and the ultimate, which is just fantastic for team strategies and trying to make executes, Skye is really a character that doesn't have that many weaknesses, and in the hands of someone that has mastered her, feels completely dominant. I would say Skye is one of the best characters in the game. Next up, we do got to talk about Raze. And Raze is the best duelist. It's very close to Jett, but Raze is seeing slightly more pick rate. I think both of these characters are very, very strong. Raze is going to see play on some different maps and does combat the meta in a little bit of a different way than Jett does, right? Raze is going to oftentimes put a lot of pressure on utility in a way that Jett does not. And that gets a lot of value when you're breaking Cypher utility, when you're breaking Killjoy utility. That's super, super strong and something that Jett just can't do. But of course, Jett can abuse certain weapons a bit better than Raze. I think it's a close call, but overall the guaranteed value goes into the Raze camp as the best duelist in my opinion. Now, last but certainly not least, we have Omen. Omen is just really strong, really versatile, and he's played in just a ton of different compositions. He's a fantastic lurker. He can do his job and basically still create really strong plays, clear space with his paranoia, and make some really exciting plays, even with his teleport, finding versatile ways to use it and really mix up exactly how you're playing. We're even seeing some experimental strategies where Omen is utilizing all his utility, and then he's going in like a duelist, you know, teleporting onto site, taking a really aggressive angle in the same way that like a Jett would or a Raze would. Omen is super strong, super powerful, one of the best characters in the game, and yeah, this is the 8.0 tier list. But let us know if you think we missed the mark on any of these characters, and check out SkillCapped to quickly climb the ranks, guaranteed or your money back. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.